That night the house felt heavier than usual, wrapped in a silence that pressed against the walls. I had been lying awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape the gnawing restlessness inside me. My marriage had long since lost its warmth. The man who once held me close now barely noticed when I left the room. I told myself it was normal, that routines and time dull passion, but deep down, loneliness had become my closest companion. It was in this emptiness that something unexpected happened, something that would shake me to my very core. I heard faint noises drifting down the hallway, too soft to be anything ordinary, yet persistent enough to pull me out of bed. My heart began to beat faster with each step as I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the wind, the television left on, or maybe my imagination. But there was a pull, a strange urgency, that pushed me forward. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle, unsure if I wanted to know what lay behind it. The moment I pushed it open, the air caught in my throat. My body froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. What I saw in that instant seared itself into me like a brand, something so forbidden, so unexpected, that I could not even process it. Time itself seemed to stop, and for a brief second I felt as though I had left my own body and was hovering above, watching a version of myself standing there in stunned disbelief. I should have turned away immediately. I should have closed the door and convinced myself it was just a dream, some trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion. But I didn't. My feet stayed planted, and my eyes refused to look away. A storm of emotions surged through me: shock, confusion, shame, and an undeniable pull that terrified me even more than what I had witnessed. Finally, with every ounce of strength I could muster, I pulled the door shut as quietly as I could and stepped back into the hallway. My chest heaved, my legs weak, as though the ground itself was threatening to swallow me whole. I made my way back to my room, each step echoing in my ears, and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep was impossible. My mind replayed the image over and over, each time sharper, each time more unbearable. I buried my face in the pillow, trying to smother the thoughts clawing their way to the surface. I told myself I had imagined it, that perhaps I had misunderstood what I saw. But deep inside I knew the truth. It was real. It had happened, and I had been a witness to something I should never have seen. As the night dragged on, I stared at the ceiling, torn between wanting to erase it from memory and being unable to stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, the vision returned, clearer than before, like a secret that refused to be silenced. And with each passing hour, one thought kept haunting me: my life had just shifted in a way that could never be undone. The morning came far too quickly, and yet I felt as though I had not slept a single second. My body moved through the motions of routine, but my mind was elsewhere, still trapped in the shadows of the night before. When I saw him at the breakfast table, my breath caught. He looked the same as always, calm and unbothered, as if nothing unusual had happened, yet something in the way his eyes lingered on me made my chest tighten. I tried to focus on small things: pouring coffee, buttering toast, but my hands trembled. I avoided looking at him for too long, afraid that if I did, the memory of what I had seen would surface in both of our eyes. Throughout the day, I told myself to push the thoughts away. I repeated in my head that I was imagining it all, that if I just ignored the unease, it would fade into nothing. But instead, the opposite happened. The memory became sharper, more insistent. It followed me everywhere: in the kitchen, in the garden, even in the quiet moments where I usually found peace. And with it came something I wasn't ready to admit, a pull I couldn't control, a strange current of temptation that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. Every glance, every small sound, seemed to hold a different weight now. I noticed details I had never paid attention to before: the curve of his smile, the way his voice carried confidence, the sudden boldness in his posture. Had those things always been there, or was I only now beginning to see them? The more I tried to resist, the more my thoughts betrayed me. My mind replayed the image from that night with merciless clarity, layering it with emotions I struggled to accept. Guilt gnawed at me like sharp teeth. I had been faithful to a husband who no longer looked at me with desire, a man whose affection had long since grown cold. And yet, here I was, consumed by thoughts I could never confess, thoughts that made me feel as though I were betraying more than just vows. I told myself it was wrong, that I was stronger than this, but the more I denied it, the more undeniable it became. And then there were the moments, those subtle, fleeting instances that seemed insignificant but carried a hidden meaning. His eyes meeting mine across the room, a smile that lasted just a second too long, the brush of a hand as we passed one another. At first, I thought I was imagining it, projecting my own forbidden thoughts onto him. But as days passed, I began to realize it wasn't only me. There was something in the air between us, unspoken but heavy, a silent acknowledgement of the secret neither of us dared to voice. One evening, the tension nearly spilled over. The house was quiet, and I found myself standing close to him, too close. Our hands brushed as I reached for a glass, and for a moment, neither of us moved away. My pulse hammered in my ears, my breath unsteady. The world seemed to pause, and in that pause, a line was nearly crossed. I stepped back quickly, forcing space between us, but the damage was done. That invisible boundary that should have kept us apart was thinner than ever, fragile and trembling. That night, lying in bed, I admitted to myself what I had been too afraid to say out loud. I was on the edge of something dangerous, something irreversible. Part of me longed to step back into safety, to bury the temptation and pretend none of it had ever happened. But another part, stronger and louder, wanted to see what would happen if I let go. The thought terrified me, but even more terrifying was how much I wanted it. Days slipped into one another, each carrying the same unspoken tension that bound us tighter. I tried to distract myself with routines, burying my thoughts under errands, chores, meaningless conversations with neighbors, anything that might silence the growing storm inside me. But no matter how hard I tried, the silence between us spoke louder than any words. Every stolen glance, every unintentional brush of his arm against mine, felt like sparks waiting for the right moment to ignite. That moment came sooner than I expected. My husband had gone away for the weekend, something about work that required his presence elsewhere. The house suddenly felt different without him, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves sensed what was about to unfold. I told myself I would keep my distance, that I would use the time alone to clear my head, but deep down, I already knew the truth. I was waiting. That evening, I found him in the living room, the glow of the television casting soft light across his face. He looked up at me, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before, something bold, almost daring. My heart raced, and yet my feet carried me closer, as if I had no control at all. I sat near him, telling myself it was innocent, telling myself I could handle the proximity. But the space between us was charged, humming with everything we had left unsaid. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable, until finally, he broke it. His voice was low, almost hesitant, but the words carried a weight that shattered the fragile wall I had built around myself. He admitted that he had felt it too, the pull, the electricity, the secret connection neither of us could deny anymore. Hearing him say it out loud should have sent me running, should have reminded me of every reason why this was wrong. But instead, I felt my resistance crumble. I whispered something back, words I can hardly remember now, except that they were enough to tell him I felt the same. In that instant, the line between us dissolved, and there was no turning back. The air thickened, the world outside faded, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. When it happened, it wasn't sudden or reckless. It was slow, deliberate, as though we both wanted to savor every second of the fall. His hand brushed mine, tentative at first, then firmer, until I found myself trembling, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of desire I had kept locked away for so long. Every touch carried the weight of forbidden hunger, every glance was a confession in itself. The guilt was there too, sharp and undeniable, but it was drowned beneath the tide of something stronger. I told myself it was just once, just a moment of weakness, but even as it was happening, I knew that was a lie. This was not an accident, nor was it something that could be erased. This was a choice, and I was making it with every heartbeat. When it was over, the silence returned, but it was different now. No longer the silence of tension, but the silence of two people who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My breath was shaky, my thoughts scattered, my body still trembling from the weight of it all. I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw the same mixture of fear and longing that consumed me. I should have felt regret. I should have been overcome with shame. But instead, I felt something else, something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, as though a part of me that had been buried had finally been awakened. We didn't speak. Words would have made it real, and neither of us was ready for that. Instead, we sat in the quiet, both of us knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The secret was ours now, binding us together in ways we could never explain, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after felt unreal, as though the world had shifted ever so slightly but no one else could sense it. I moved through the kitchen, making coffee, setting the table, pretending everything was ordinary. Yet inside me, nothing was ordinary anymore. My hands shook as I poured, my body still remembering the night before, while my mind screamed at me to hide it. He walked in casually, almost too casually, and when our eyes met, my breath faltered. There was no spoken acknowledgement, but there didn't need to be. We both knew, and that unspoken truth was louder than any conversation. When my husband called later to say he'd be home sooner than expected, my heart nearly stopped. Panic surged through me at the thought of him walking in and sensing something different in the air. I tried to calm myself, forcing a smile, reminding myself that people don't see what they don't want to see. And he didn't. When he returned that evening, he kissed me on the cheek in the same distracted way he always did, asked about dinner, and carried on as though nothing at all had changed. For him, life remained steady, routine, predictable. For me, life had been split in two, the woman I had been before, and the woman I had become now. The days that followed were a blur of secret glances and careful restraint. Every time our eyes met across the room, a rush of adrenaline surged through me. Every accidental brush of contact sent me spiraling into memories of what had happened, and what might happen again. I told myself to stop, to distance myself, but the truth was that I didn't want to. I was no longer fighting the temptation. I was craving it. But with desire came fear. Fear of being caught, fear of the walls caving in, fear of the secret spilling out in ways I couldn't control. That fear reached its peak one evening when my husband nearly walked in at the wrong time. A simple mistake, an unlocked door, a careless closeness, and suddenly, disaster hovered on the edge of discovery. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might betray me, but somehow, he didn't notice. Somehow, he was blind to it all. It should have been a warning, a chance to step back, to cut the ties before it all collapsed. But instead, it did the opposite. It bound me even tighter, made me cling even more fiercely to the dangerous thrill of it all. I began to realize something about myself, something I wasn't ready to admit. I no longer felt guilt. The shame that had once gnawed at me was gone, replaced by a hunger I couldn't deny. I had stopped asking myself if it was wrong, and started asking myself how far I was willing to go to keep it. One night, lying awake with my husband beside me, I understood the truth. I didn't love him, not anymore, maybe not for a very long time. What I felt now, what consumed me, was stronger, darker, more intoxicating than anything he could give me. And in that moment, I accepted it. I embraced it. The secret I carried wasn't a burden anymore. It was power. Looking back now, I know that night changed everything. It wasn't just a moment of weakness, wasn't just a fleeting lapse in judgment. It was a revelation, a breaking of chains I hadn't even realized I was wearing. My life didn't return to what it had been before. It couldn't. I had crossed a line, and instead of turning back, I chose to keep walking deeper into the shadows. And though no one around me knows, though I wear the same smile, speak the same words, and play the same role, inside I am different. I carry a secret that lives in every glance, every breath, every heartbeat. A secret that binds me to him forever. A secret that rewrote my life in ways I never imagined. And that secret changed everything.